Hey guys, I thought it was long overdue for me to share my story with you about why I'm so passionate about dog training and dog sports in particular, and sort of how I got my start in it, and the birth behind High Drive and some of the other things I'm involved in. So, just to kind of set the background a little bit, I just graduated university, got my first sort of real job in the professional world, and sort of a legal type background in that sense. And I was riding horses at the time. I think I had two reiners when I moved out, reining horses. I don't know if you can see behind me, so that's Chase, picture of him, and then me riding Hazel there. So I think I had Hazel at the time, and maybe Lexi for a little bit, and so I was riding them about 5 days a week, competing on the weekends, especially in the summer when there were more shows, and working with a really well-known trainer and judge. So I was kind of involved in the horse thing, and as you may or may not know, horses and dogs go together pretty well. Lots of horse people, pretty much all of them, have dogs too, and I've always loved dogs. Growing up, we had a little Bichon Shih Tzu cross, who's just a wonderful dog. Can't say we did a lot with her, sort of the typical just pet companion dog. Just a wonderful little thing. And I think we got her when I was about 7, so I did most of the training with her, which really was probably a book my mom bought, and probably taught her sit and lay down, and probably had to bribe her with treats to do all those things, but she was just really special. And so, like I said, graduated, moved out on my own, and really wanted a dog of my own. At that point, she'd passed away maybe for about, I think it was maybe 4 years at that point. So it was kind of time. My parents didn't want another dog before I moved out, so I was kind of waiting to move out to do that. So I did. I kind of did my homework and figured out what kind of breed I wanted, and I always kind of drawn to hunting dogs. So kind of did some research and decided on the curly coated retriever. I'd never met one, so it was a bit of a gamble, I guess. But from what I'd read, it sounded like they'd be a really good fit for me. So that's how I ended up with the curlies. I found a breeder in upstate New York that was quite well known, and really liked all the information she put out and how she raised her puppies. So went and picked up Tess, and kind of, as they say, the rest is history. Um, it's funny, thinking back about how you got into it and got started, and like I said, I was involved in the horses at the time, so I'd already kind of worked with some of the sort of training with animals, and thought like, oh, I can do this, and I want to be like the best owner out there. Like, read every book that was, I could put my hands on, like how to raise a good puppy, and I was just like so committed, like I was going to be one of the good owners, and do everything I possibly could for her to raise a good puppy, and make sure that she always had a good home. And I wasn't, again, kind of funny in hindsight, I didn't really want to rescue, because I thought, like, I want that perfect puppy. I don't want anything wrong with her, and like if I raise her, I can do it all right, and end up with a perfect puppy, whatever that is. So that's kind of that was kind of my start, and like I said, kind of the saying, like, God laughs at all of our plans, but um, the you get the dog or you get the horse you need, not necessarily the one you want. So I certainly had my troubles with Tess, and kind of our challenges and problems as we went through. And so I just kind of want to share a little bit of that with you. But again, that was just sort of my mindset going in, was like, I'm gonna just, like, I've read these books and I've signed up for the puppy class, and like I just want to be the best dog owner I can be. And I know, like, for a lot of you, that's probably your start as well. Just like, no, I don't think anybody gets a dog thinking like, oh, I'm gonna be a crappy owner and not do anything with my dog. It's like a lot of us, we really love our animals and want what's best for them. So that's how we get into it. And yeah, so that was me, kind of idealistic and naive, and and got into that with her. And so, of course, from that naivety, trouble often follows, as it did in our case. So, mostly kind of typical puppy things and new owner things, problems. But we had some trouble initially with sort of separation anxiety, and not necessarily full-blown separation anxiety, but typical puppy not wanting you to leave the house to go to work, and jumping on people that we met on walks. And again, like, I read all these books, so it was like, okay, get her to sit and get her to do this, and so like working on all that stuff. And I'd done puppy training and all that, so we've gone through quite a bit of that, but still struggling. I remember we took a out and about class, because I was just at my wit's end with her, and just wouldn't focus on walks. And it's like, yeah, I want her to come sit instead of jumping on somebody, but she just wouldn't pay attention to me. So like, okay, calling the professionals, right? So we signed up for this class, and still I just remember, like, felt like, oh, I'm working so hard on this, and like every time after class we'd go home and do all the homework and throughout the week and come back, and it's like everybody else's puppy was progressing, and I just felt like I was still there and still struggling with all the day one stuff. And again, in hindsight, it's easy to say like, oh, I should have had better treats, or I should have done this or should have done that, but at the time it was definitely frustrating. And so just kind of dealing with regular puppy stuff like that, and little, I don't want to say little warning signs, but if I'd known more, probably some orange flags, yellow flags were going up, if not red flags. I was single when I moved out, so didn't have kids, didn't have a lot of people around when she was a puppy, so she was definitely timid around strangers, which is pretty, I'll say, usual for the breed. For a retriever, they're much more standoffish than kind of your golden or your typical Labrador would be. So nothing out of the ordinary, but like as an owner, you're always kind of looking for those things that are little red flags or whatever, that's like, yeah, maybe you should do something about that, maybe you should do something about that, and kind of ignored it, and or tried to deal with it on my own, I guess, as best as I could. And still kind of riding horses and kind of fitting all that stuff in between. So like, you don't want to admit you don't know what you're doing, and kind of, especially if, like, again, involved in the horses, you're kind of in an animal training industry anyway, so like it's embarrassing to admit you don't know how to solve something, or you're going through a problem. And I think most people can relate to that. Whatever your training issue is with your dog, or whatever's frustrating you, I mean, there's always something, whether it's house training problem, or barking in the house, or whatever it is. It's hard to admit, like, despite all your research, the classes you've gone and the training you've done, or even if you're a professional trainer, like, we all reach kind of the limit of our toolbox, and it's hard to admit. And I think especially if you're already involved in an animal or training type industry, it's embarrassing. And so anyway, so away I went my merry way, ignoring it, as always solves our problems. So I'd kind of been dealing with some reactivity issues with her, and again, I think that was, some of it was just like, maybe some loose or problems not loose leash walking, so maybe a little bit of leash reactivity, a little bit of fear of kids mixed in there. Wasn't crazy about skateboards, and again, like, all these things, pretty common, like a lot of dogs and owners deal with that. So it's hard to know, like, okay, well, when is it just, like, okay, most dogs don't like skateboards, like, that's not probably the end of the world, but when does it cross over to that line where it's like, no, okay, I need to deal with that? And so we had some trouble with, like, dog parks and things like that with other dogs. And I've been dealing with some health issues with her since she was about 6 months old, so kind of some food allergy type issues, and never really could quite get a resolution. So again, in hindsight, I think that played into some of this, but it was just, maybe small problems building up to a bigger problem. And of course it did. So there we were, sitting on our patio, and out in in the summer, and the neighbors' kids were playing in the front yard of our little condo building, and Tess goes to bite one of them through the fence. So, of course, she couldn't get to her because she was behind the fence, but scared the living crap out of me, out of the kid's parents, and the kid, of course. And luckily, they were really good about it. But it was a big wake-up call, and it's all those little things that you ignore or aren't sure how or when to handle them. It's not always clear, I think, as an owner. As a professional dog trainer, you're going to see different things and kind of can spot what's out of the norm, where some things they're normal dog behaviors until they aren't. And I think I had definitely in hindsight had some of those warning signs, but it wasn't until she tried to bite this kid that it was like, I think for me it was that moment of, if I don't deal with this, if I can't fix this or manage this, I'm gonna have to put her down. And that's, again, going into it is like, oh, I'm gonna raise this perfect puppy. That's not something we want to face or want to deal with. And I was very cognizant going into getting a puppy that I didn't want her to be in a shelter or kind of be one of those statistics. And here we were being one of those statistics potentially. So that was kind of I guess my wall or my low point with her. It was just kind of, like I said, nothing happened, which is great. Nobody was hurt, and I don't think she didn't want to hurt them. If she'd have wanted to bite her, the child, she would have. They were close enough. But what about next time? And so anyway, I kind of, had a big cry that night and realized I had to do something about this. So I called a trainer that I knew from, actually taught her out and about class, that I had worked with before and got along with really well. And it's kind of like, okay, what do we do? Where do we start? And so, how do we not be one of those statistics? Is it fixable? Isn't it fixable? Fixable with quotes. I don't want her to hurt or injure anybody, and she's the sweetest dog that could be with me. And I don't think she has an aggressive bone in her body, but she definitely is reactive and nervous around strangers. So, I don't want that to lead to her feeling trapped and hurting somebody. So, everybody's got a different philosophy on that, I guess, but, I think people come before our pets, and that's sort of my take on it. And, so that was my point. It was like, we have to fix this or I'm gonna have to put her down. I don't want to risk anybody's life or injury or whatever. So so that's where I was at, and we had to come up with a plan. So from there, we started with the trainer, a couple private sessions we'd booked. And, for her, from her experience, probably was not a very serious case. But, of course, to me, it's like, this is the dog that I love, that, I want to do right by. So it was maybe not a very serious aggression type case. It was obviously very serious and important to me. So we started working a couple sessions. She had a stepdaughter she was able to bring. I think she was about 8 at the time. And so she was able to help us just kind of slowly and safely introduce children. We were able to get the upstairs neighbors involved, so the child that Tess had tried to bite. And so kind of able to work together and see if we could help her over it. So started kind of implementing and doing some of the training that she'd suggested, and and definitely saw improvements. So kind of following the BAT type principles, if you're familiar with that. And so we made a fair bit of progress with that. Again, like our kid helpers were able to ride skateboards and scooters and run by and feeder treats and all that stuff. So that was good in kind of that managed type environment where you're prepared. We've got my treats, we're in a training type session. And of course I was practicing on my own, so as much as possible, like go by a playground or a busy pathway or whatever where there's kids and try and work through the same kind of training, behavior modification type scenario. So we were doing pretty well, but still kind of having some trouble. So the main thing was just like she'd see them and then start staring, right? Like the big wide eye stare, and just having trouble getting over that, and kind of so we kind of decided it was the next step of the plan. Like we're doing okay, but not where we wanted to be. So we need to introduce a little bit more movement. So that's kind of when we started to introduce some tricks, and I think that was a really great thing. It certainly was a great thing for us, but probably a great thing for most people, because I think like kids love tricks, loves, and I think just the public in general, they just really love to see dogs doing tricks. There's just like something about it that we all love, just can't help but smiling. So we'd go near a park, not in a park, but say 50 feet away or whatever, we could kind of safely do where she could still focus on me. And we do simple tricks like a spin or a down or whatever, jump in the air, weave between the legs, whatever. And whatever Tess was confident with and could pay attention with. And just that one simple change of like, okay, we just have to keep her moving, keep her mind going. And before we knew it, we could walk through the playground, and we could go, like kids could be playing on a swing, and we could go put our paws on the slide, or walk between them, or whatever. And I wouldn't say she was probably still mindful of them, but much more relaxed, much more able to focus on me. And I think it just gave me the confidence that I could deal with whatever other issues there were. So we could still keep training on our own. It was just, I think I needed that confidence boost probably more than she did. And I think it was a way, like if you've dealt with whatever training issue with your dog, and there's, again, whether it's barking or house training or pulling on the leash or whatever it is, aggression, reactivity, whatever, we just get so frustrated, and I think our relationship can't help but break down a little bit. And as much as we love our dogs and would do anything for them, it's hard day in and day out to just that constant wearing, that constant frustration, like, why can't we get this? Why are you, especially kind of the finger pointing, why are you scared, or why are you doing this? And certainly the why can't I fix it part. And so I think the confidence boost for me was more important probably than anything we actually did for Tess. But it really helped me know, give me the confidence to know I could fix it, or at least manage it. So, instead of dealing with a dog that's, like bucking at the end of the leash, barking at some kid skateboarding by us, and they're 50 yards away, I could get her to focus on me. We could step a few feet away and she'd still keep that focus. And it's not to say she wasn't still bothered by it, because that was a long process, but it was like, okay, I can manage it. I don't have to be, peering around every corner and on the lookout for every dog, and, thinking about every possibility and what could come up, and who's around the corner, and what dog's off leash that shouldn't be, and what owner's not in control, and what kid is there, and where am I going to walk that's not busy, and, just all these things run through your mind. And like, okay, I just wanted a dog so I could take them out for a walk, after work, and instead it's like adding all this stress into my life because I'm trying to figure out where to go with them, and how to deal with this. So I think that was really big, and so I'm very grateful to Jade for helping us come up with those solutions. And of course it's never just that. So we were also dealing with some food allergy type issues at the time, which complicated things, because there's only certain treats I could give, and most of them were not very high motivation. So this was maybe a couple years later, we was doing okay for a couple years, and then hit some more roadblocks, and just Tessa's health was just awful. It got to the point where she'd have been she's almost 9 now, so this was probably 2 years ago, so 6. And so her health was just awful, and I don't know to this day, I don't really know what the issue was. But like, we couldn't go to a class. Like, she was itchy like crazy, and just like diarrhea issues, and her eyes would get really red, and anyway, just all sorts of health kind of gut and allergy type issues that we were dealing with. And again, in hindsight, I'm sure all along the way, since she was a puppy, these kind of gut issues were causing some trouble. But anyway, we'd progressed quite a bit with some of the reactivity issues, and then all of a sudden, at 6, whatever it was, she kind of had this big health crisis, and it was like going back to square one. It was just like she was just felt so crummy that nothing we'd trained and worked on, it just didn't have any impact. Like, she just felt so bad that everything was a threat. Everything she saw was a threat. And so, again, just like the frustration would, for me dealing with that, of like, I just like spent, 3 or 4 years training this, and like, we're doing so well, and then to hit this setback. And, like, somebody could come within 10 feet, just a regular person she'd normally be fine with, and just like, she'd blow up at the end of the leash. And it's embarrassing, and, can't help but think like, oh, what are they thinking? And then, if kind of your training philosophy, or kind of what's worked in the past, I don't want to punish her for doing it. I'll just make it worse and make her more scared in the future. So like, it just looks like you're not doing anything, but the only thing I feel like I can do, of course, is just, watch her explode and then get better, and then reward her when she's fine again. But the frustration, the heartbreak is real. No matter what, even if you think you're doing the right thing, it's still hard to see those setbacks. And so I ended up working with another trainer, because at that point Jade had moved out of the city and was training at somewhere else. And they were able to help a little bit. Again, like, the health finally while we were kind of in that process, the health issues really reached a peak, and it was just terrible. Like, she could barely go for a 10-minute walk with me around the block, and she just had no energy, and it was like walking like she was about 17 years old. We were like tiptoeing around the block, and that's all she had energy for, and it just felt like garbage. So of course was blowing up at everything she saw. So it's like, no matter what I wanted to do, to help train her through that, nothing was, when she got into that state, when her health was that bad, nothing was working. So kind of all I could do was ignore it and keep going as much as possible, and of course keep other people safe, and keep away from them enough that to try and avoid those blow-ups. But so here we are, kind of 2 years later, and her health's a lot better. I think we've finally found a diet that's kind of working for her, and some meds that are working for her, and she's got back her energy, so we're doing sports again. And but it's shocking. It's, you think you're doing the right thing training wise, and maybe you are, and you're like, you're making progress, and then a health thing pops up, and there's nothing, you try and work with the vet, obviously, to solve that, but training wise, there's nothing you can do to change the behavior. And so I think for me, it's just like, the feeling of helplessness, or the frustration dealing with all that, and can't help but impact your relationship with your dog. So I think that's why I'm so passionate about dog training. It seems like an odd connection to make in the sports in general, but I know for myself, probably doing the dog sports, the one thing that really allowed our relationship to come together. We're going through all this frustration with the reactivity, and kind of all these other issues and health issues, and just all these frustrations that build up. And if it wasn't for the dog training, there would have been no way, in the dog sports, there would have been no way for us to come back together. And So I think as much as the health issues also impacted some of those dog sports, like we were doing agility at the time and some fly ball and stuff, and it's hard to be in a class. Obviously, she's reactive to other dogs. I can't feed her any good treats, so we're trying to train in this environment, which is not ideal. And but I think we needed some fun, some positive outlet where we could really improve our relationship together and kind of get us back, not back to square one, but you do when you're frustrated, you do all kinds of things that you regret, when you're out of the heat of the moment. And I think just to have that positive outlet for us to work together towards something, for me to be happy with her, for her to see that in me, and to kind of experience that herself. It's like, okay, we can go do something and have fun, and my mom's not mad at me all the time, and of course she loves the sports and loves doing the ball for fly ball and all that stuff. So I think we really needed that, and so that's why I'm was really excited to open the store, to open High Drive, and to really, I don't want to say push dog sports, but it seems like a funny recommendation, but whatever issue you're dealing with your dog, I really believe that you kind of need to add something to your routine. So again, with us, with the reactivity and children, like tricks were a huge help. And so whatever you're dealing with, I think something along the dog sport line where it's like, okay, we can get our relationship back together, and kind of have that positivity reintroduced, because there's no way to keep that frustration out. So you kind of need kind of those low moments. You need something positive to think about and to kind of add to that. So as you're dealing with the other frustrations and the other training issues that you have to deal with, to have a better life for you and a better life for them, I think it's important to add something positive to really, bring that relationship back together. So I'd say I'm probably a pretty competitive person by nature, and I did have, I'll say, big dreams of competing with Tess and doing some agility and stuff like that with her, and now with Riggs. I guess our goals change, and that title or that whatever that I wanted to achieve with my perfect puppy that I was going to get, it just didn't matter as much anymore. And so if you're not a super competitive person, I don't want you to feel like, oh, I have to, sorry, that was Riggs. I don't want you to feel like I'm saying you have to compete. You don't have to compete at all. But I think just having that goal and that sport to improve your relationship, that's really what I came out of that experience believing in. And again, it wasn't about a win and whatever, and we've changed sports probably 5 times from what I thought we'd be doing, but just to have that relationship, I think was a big game changer for us. And that's why I'd encourage any of you to try whatever sport you might be interested in, or just something to improve your own relationship with your dog if you're struggling with something that's got you frustrated. So that was a really long-winded explanation about why High Drive and why I'm so passionate about it, but I hope you've enjoyed this, and would love your thoughts about maybe why you've gotten involved in dog sports, or what you're interested in giving a try to, or even just what training issues you're having and what frustrations you're going through. 'Cause, sometimes just sharing those frustrations lightens the load a little bit. So thanks again for joining me, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.